Recently, YouTube creator Guy released a 4-hour video discussing the state of plagiarism on the platform. He called out several creators for either blatantly copying other people's work, or at the very least, working with people who has questionable integrity. I believe the fear of committing plagiarism is a genuine fear felt by all kinds of creators. Well, maybe not these content creators, but for those who take creating stuff seriously, be it writing, drawing, film, or music, the notion of doing a plagiarism, no matter intentional or accidental, can be incredibly distressing, because the essence of creation is to make new stuff. The word create is borrowed from the Latin word curare, meaning to bring into existence or to form something out of nothing. If we are just making things that already exist, then what are we doing here? What differentiates us from factory workers? Factory workers don't create. They just make the same product over and over again, exactly as they are instructed. If something works, if people like it, if it makes money, what's the harm in doing the same stuff over and over again? Hell, why not just copy whatever other successful people are doing? Of course, there's a clear line between learning from other people's work and a flat-out rip-off. We can generally tell when it's the latter. Sometimes unintentional plagiarism can happen by mistaking old memory as newfound idea, a psychological phenomenon called cryptomnesia. Still, it's relatively easy to see around this issue. Our mind may forget and falsify memory, but machines don't. No, what I'm concerned about is much more internal. What if all I think or I write about is somehow internalized from things I read before? As someone who has a habit of consuming quite a lot of materials on topics I find interesting, I almost always doubt if what I'm writing is my own original idea. Or is it just a result of me binging 16 video essays in a row? Did I really think The Last Guardian has the best ending in video game history? Or did I just listen to Jacob Geller talk about it for 15 minutes and thought, oh my god, that's so true, then just took the idea for myself? What if everything I have ever written are just bits and pieces I scraped off other people's work? One of the famous works by Jorge Luis Borges is his 1941 short story, The Library of Babel. It is a library that contains every book that can ever exist. Anything you can write in 410 pages using 25 characters is already in the Library of Babel. A few years ago, I tried to calculate how many books are in the Library of Babel, and the answer is so mind-numbingly big, I can't even compare it to anything, not even the cosmos. Modern estimation of the amount of individual atoms in our observable universe is about this much. It's a 1 followed by 80 zeros, give or take, while the Library of Babel contains this many books. Actually, this is not it. I have ran out of screen space because it's a 2 followed by 1,834,097 zeros. This very sentence, all my past, current and future scripts, everything anyone will ever write, is already in the library. There's no new idea. The totality of humanity's writing is already written. But then, even the collective effort of our species is only a drop in the ocean that is the Library of Babel. I did not lose any sleep over this idea, partly because the Library of Babel is not real, and partly because I got this idea from a Jacob Geller video. Do you see now? This is what keeps me up at night. The notion that I never have any original idea to begin with. Given part of being a writer is taking inspiration from others' work and putting a personal spin on it. Still, it's hard to shake the feeling of being a copyist. When I was still in school, I once studied about a Han Dynasty poem by an anonymous writer, titled Fighting South of the Wall. The poem depicts the horrific aftermath of a battle. With war raging endlessly, the dead are left unburied, free for the crows to feed on. So I bared the crows. Mourn for the dead. Those who die in the wild will not get buried. Their flesh can't escape you. It was a fine poem. But only later in life, I learned that there were at least 20 poems of the same title. Turns out, it's by no means an uncommon occurrence. Poets often borrow titles from older works. And guess what? People can indeed write about the same subject matter and come up with their own interpretation. Fighting South of the Wall by Anonymous doesn't read the same as Fighting South of the Wall by Li Bai, and still distinct from the image depicted by Liu Jiaolin. The anonymous Han poet focuses on the horrible consequences of war. Li Bai acknowledges both the effect of war and its necessity as a last resort, while Liu Jiaolin chooses to embrace the violent spirit of those who leave their home to fight on foreign soil. And they are all valid in their own right. Of course they are. Every single one of them written hundreds of years apart by completely different people under the unique environment of their time. My mistake was to assume that we, the world we live in, and the things we write about it, exist in a vacuum. They do not. Have you ever had a newfound appreciation for an art piece after listening to the museum guy talk about its history and inspiration, or replay a game you've played as a child, only to find out it means so much more to you now than it did 20 years ago? Or read a piece of analysis so profound it completely overturns your perception to an art piece, and in turn, the world? I have, and I believe at least in some small ways, you have too. In Eliot Weinberger's 1987 work, 19 Ways of Looking at One Way, he introduced readers to a Chinese poem by the 8th century poet, and the 18 attempts of translating it. The poem in question describes the sight of an empty hill and a forest at dusk. It was written in a traditional format known as the 5-character quatrain, meaning the entire poem consists of 4 verses and each verse only has 5 characters. To depict not one, but 2 scenes with so few words is obviously evidence of Wang Wei's craftsmanship, but it also presents an unique challenge for the translators. How do one translate such a short poem where each characters often have multiple meanings? Well, if you want to know the detail, it's actually not a very long read. But the main point being, all these translations necessarily carry part of the translator's read of the poem, like how Deserted Mountain was used in Ching's translation instead of the more semantically correct Empty Mountain. In further comments by Octavio, who himself translated the poem into Spanish, he explained that the decision he made during the process. Paz not only considered the original text, but also the circumstance under which Wang Wei created the piece, in the same time referencing early translators who have arguably pioneered the field of recreating Eastern poetry in an Indo-European language. Our experience with art is never isolated from the world. As Eliot writes, every reading is an act of translation into the reader's intellectual and emotional life. As no individual remains the same, each reading becomes a different, not merely another reading. The same poem cannot be read twice. And if you ask me, creating art is equally a read on the world around us, a conversation between the world and ourselves. Be it all the video essays I watched while writing the script, the 20 different Fighting South of the Wall, or the 19 Ways of Looking at One Way, they are all a unique combination of the time, the people, and all the work that came before them. Everything that is essential has already been written is more of an interesting observation than a real limitation to the medium. We cannot escape the influence from the world and each other, just like we cannot avoid breathing air. Of course, plagiarism is still a very real thing we all need to be mindful of. But what I need to understand is that everything I've read, everything I've experienced on this earth, become part of me. It's a fool's errand to try to separate that from my own writing. And really, would I want to, even if I can?